Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Grace Podcast. It is so great to have you with us today. If you've been journeying with us through the series How to Heal, it has been a really great series so far. If you've missed the first 2 weeks, I really encourage you to catch up on those too. So today I'm very excited to have with me Kerry Janse van Rensburg. Her parents named her really well. My namesake. Kerry is one of the directors at Project Exodus, which is a phenomenal recovery and addiction recovery center that we have going around South Africa. And Kerry, I'd love you just to tell us a little bit more about yourself and then also about your healing and wholeness journey as we go talking about this series, How to Heal.
Thanks so much, Kerry. It's so nice to talk to someone and say, Kerry, hi, Kerry.
Yes.
I think just in a nutshell, we've got a story of addiction. So obviously Project Exodus is an addiction recovery ministry. We equip and empower churches to run their own addiction recovery groups. And we also look for recovery for the spouses and the loved ones of those in addiction who are often forgotten in the whole process. So my story goes back to my husband and I are now married for 30 years. And for more than 20 of those years, he battled with problematic pornography use. Moving into addiction to a place where he just said he doesn't know what to do anymore. He doesn't know how to cope. Through all that time, we went to a lot of people. We went to psychologists. We went to sexologists. We went to spoke to pastors, and he would be like fine for a while and then not, and then fine, which we now understand to be the cycle of addiction. So there was a lot of focus on him and his healing and how to get recovery for him and how for him to stop. And that was kind of the aim. And then eventually we hit a couple of years that were just very traumatic. And one thing, I actually did the Grace Counseling course with Mans, who you had on last time or one of the previous times. And just in writing my story, it was like a case study. It was actually my story, which was obviously very obvious in the story. And she said, don't you guys need to maybe go for some counseling? So which we proceeded to do with some of the Grace counselors. And from there, they pointed us towards Conrad, who was actually in our church, who was running recovery here. And we'd kind of avoided him because we thought, well, it's not substance abuse. This is pornography. So what does he know about that? But eventually, as a matter of course, there was nowhere else to turn. And Bram had relapsed again. And so eventually I ended up here as a very broken woman. And from the very first meeting, I could tell you that my healing, literally, there was an about turn because I felt heard, I felt understood, I felt validated, I was given my voice back. And so that was the start of my healing journey. And how I knew that my healing had started was I tried to read books all over the 20 plus years, and that would be very triggering for me. But after joining with Project Exodus, suddenly it was like, oh my goodness, I can read books and I can devour books, and it's not triggering for me. I'm in a safe space. I felt like I was in a safe space. So that was about just over 4 years ago that we started our journey. And we've seen it just been amazing how God has then been able to use us, which we can talk into just now, just to help others in their journeys as well. But that's kind of in a very quick nutshell.
It always seems like it doesn't do it justice, because like you say, 20 years of your 30-year marriage, that's a long time to be suffering. And I think what you said is so pertinent in the fact that you thought, with Conrad and Project Exodus, that they might not have been able to help because it's not a substance addiction. And I know a lot of people don't view the obsessive use of pornography as an addiction. So I think it's really great for our listeners to know that there is help out there for all sorts of addictions. It's not just drugs and alcohol, which is what everyone only assumes addictions can be from. So I really appreciate that coming into the fold with us today. Did you find it very liberating to know that it was a sphere that was more out there and accessible to chat about than what you previously thought it was?
I think it was, but I think in a way we also kind of, as Project Exodus, we were pioneering into that area. So we just, there weren't programs around at that time, even 4 years ago. There were a couple, but they didn't really understand addiction. And so to actually do the program without understanding addiction okay, in 16 weeks we're going to have this solved and it's all going to be good, and it doesn't work like that. You know, it's our sanctification, our salvation is a journey. We are saved, but we are being saved. It's the same thing in recovery. We are in recovery. We are doing recovery, and there's a rewiring that has to take place in the brain. I mean, there's been pathways, neurological pathways that have been established that now have to be undone and replaced with new neurological pathways. So I think for me, it felt like I was in a safe space, but also in a way feeling like as a team, we were pioneering in the space.
Yeah.
To the point now where we are just currently finishing off our program, our pornography program that we've kind of put together, and we're so excited. We've seen a number of people just really, really heal in this area, and we know it's a big problem in the churches. And I think because we're not speaking enough about it, people are holding back, and there's shame and there's guilt and there's, well, I've tried and nothing's worked, so really what else is going to help, you know? So, I think it has been so good to be part of it, but it's also been such a learning curve, and it's been a beautiful learning curve. It's been beautiful to see people who've been absolutely broken find their voice, find their confidence, find their purpose in life, and really heal.
Yes.
So,
well, I mean, following on from that, there's a two-part question for me, is the fact of, you know, you mentioned about the shame and the guilt that can come with it. And, you know, I do realize it happens with a lot of addictions, and possibly a little bit more so when it comes to pornography. On the counter, that a lot of people feel like it's actually quite a normal thing as well, and that it's not something that is a problem because it's, you know, it's just normal. It's something that my body wants to do. Exactly. So do you think, besides those factors, for those who maybe struggle with this addiction, or maybe a spouse or a loved one with someone of this addiction, as well as all other addictions, what are generally the main things that prevent people from coming forward and starting that journey of healing from addiction and healing as a victim or a spouse or a loved one of someone else's addiction?
So, Kerry, I think there can be many things. I mean, obviously the shame is a massive thing. And, you know, I've tried so many different things. Is this really going to make a difference? So there's that side of things. There's the other side of, well, actually, I don't really think I've got a problem. I can control this. And I don't see this as an addiction. So why should I be going to addiction recovery group? You know, this is just something that I need to control. I think the other thing is seeing this as a moral failure, you know, so we term it a moral failure. So I've just got to stop it, you know, just as though if I was using heroin, I would just have to stop it, you know, there's no detoxing. So I think there's a number of issues, and then obviously not really wanting to give up, you know, until it often takes some sort of turning point for someone to decide, actually, now I need to do something about it. So most of the time it's a wife who says, actually, who finds out, or something happens and they say, listen, this is it. This is what you need to do. And that's what happens most of the time. That's kind of the turning point for most guys. I think for women, there's an incredible amount of shame, you know. Am I not sufficient as a woman? You know, flip, if I open up about this, how people are going to think about me, you know, and so many. And actually, he's the one that needs recovery. Why am I coming? You know, what help do I need? You know,
I think that's actually huge for a supporter, hey, that it is, they're the ones with the problem. Why do I need the help? Yeah.
No, 100%, you know, and not realizing, actually, as supporters, I had adjusted my life to Brahm's dysfunction. And so, and there were obviously things I brought into the marriage myself. So it wasn't just, I can't put all of it on him, but it exacerbated and escalated some of my coping mechanisms, which weren't healthy. So I had to unlearn those, and I had to learn how to actually just be kind with myself, but also be able to express. It was okay to say, I'm really angry with my husband now, you know, and not feel like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Oh God, I've got to forgive him. And absolutely, I've got to forgive. But also I need to process my reality. And so it's often like, especially sometimes amongst Christian circles, it's about giving people permission to face their reality. it's okay. I was chatting with a lady the other day, and she was so angry with her husband, and yet on the other hand, I still love him. And I said, well, that's okay. It's absolutely okay to hold that intention, and sometimes we think we've got to be the saint, but we're on a journey. It's okay. That's okay. Yeah. I think women need to hear it's okay.
They do need to hear that, because we look at it as Christians, we must always forgive, just forgive, but if you're still getting hurt and that you're still in the same place, you can't only just forgive. There has to be more to it than that. We have to allow ourselves.
Yeah. And just because I choose to forgive doesn't mean there are no consequences and boundaries that I need to put in place. I know you've just been working with Henry Clyde stuff, but obviously he's the boundaries guy. But I still need to put boundaries in place to protect myself. And I've got to learn to revalue myself. Yes. And being submissive doesn't mean being a doormat and just being used, So there's a whole lot that comes into play. And so sometimes it's just helping the wife just grow in strength in herself in order to be able to make the right decision, or be able to say, actually, this is the line in the sand. They can't always start off like that, but it's to bring strength to their character. And give them support in the process. Yeah. And then just to add, while we're here, Kerry, we talk about men as being the one with a pornography problem. And obviously this is my passion to deal with this area, because it's been such a hard part of my life. So if I always tend to err on that side, but this is a huge thing for women as well. The problematic pornography use is massive for women as well. And we're getting regular phone calls, and we're hoping to have a program established soon. But we have got women on our supporters on our sort of our weekly recovery groups that are battling in this area as well. And their shame is far outweighs a man's shame, because everyone's doing it, which is not the truth, although the statistics show that it is almost. But the statistics for women in between the ages of 18 and 30 are 76% are watching on a monthly basis. Wow. And there's the whole thing of what happens behind the scenes. I mean, we don't even get into that, but it's not a harmless pastime. And the damage to the brain, whether addiction or not addiction, whether watching aggressive pornography or not aggressive pornography, the damage is huge. And they've taken SPECT scans of someone who's been battled with heroin and someone who's battled with pornography, and the damage is almost identical, if not slightly worse. So, and there are a lot of studies around that at the moment. There are huge studies that have been done.
So, I mean, it's not only affecting the person's life and behaviors and, attitudes and things like that, it's affecting their brain as well.
100%. So pornography addiction is often the same thing as an internet addiction. And Dr. Archibald Hart, he's just phenomenal. He's from South Africa. He's in America. He's a he's between science and neuropsychology, but he's kind of in that area. And he just says that him and his daughter have done studies on what the internet is doing to our brains. And he just says, like, spending 3 hours or more causes significant reduction in the number of gray cells in the brain, gray matter in the brain. And I always say, we know men don't have much to begin with, and that's a joke. If you need to cut that out, you can. But sometimes it's such a tense subject that we've got to kind of break it.
Break it up.
That's not the truth. But what we do find is the areas that affect empathy are kind of affected. The areas that are in the brain that are responsible, two primary areas in the brain responsible for empathy, are negatively affected. And that's where some of the reduction in gray matter happens. So someone who's battling with pornography often battles to have empathy and feel with other people. So it's about learning how to do that. But there's so much more. There's so much more. Pornography is inherently about entitlement. Not even, it's more than coercion, it's about being entitled. So that is becoming the nature of of much of what we see in people who are not surrendered to Christ is almost a sense of entitlement, you know. Yeah.
And like you say, it's quite hard. There's so many different attributes that come out of the addiction as well. So to try and summarize and put it in a nutshell is obviously quite a difficult thing.
Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting because we need to know, you know, addiction of any sort. We think that it just shows or it doesn't show. It's a hidden abuse, or it's a on display abuse, etc. The same thing with, you know, the way it affects not just behaviors but brain matter and your empathy, the way you're relating to others. You know, that's a huge thing. That's a huge way that it can impact your life, your loved ones' lives. And I like that what you were saying earlier about having the boundaries in place. If you are a spouse or a loved one of someone who has an addiction of any sort, you know, from this last week in our Sunday series, Dr. Henry Cloud's, what we based it off of, he was sharing about the fact of separating from others in regards to boundaries. So not pulling away from it in regards to needing to put that boundary in place. And so I love the fact that you touched on that. And so I just want to see from your side of things, with being a spouse and a loved one of someone who was in addiction and is now in recovery, what has been the most important thing that you've learned around the boundaries for yourself, specifically around the areas of addiction and journeying towards recovery together?
I think, Kerry, one of the first things, and this kind of happened almost before I stepped into recovery, was that I was very enmeshed and I was trying to control Bram's behavior. So I had the code for the TV and I had his accountability came to me. So there was a lot of control. And in that process, getting very enmeshed, taking on the mother role, he was the child role, which wasn't healthy for our relationship. And so moving from that enmeshment to the place where actually I realized that nothing I was doing was actually helpful, moving to that kind of dissociation and then learning to be interdependent. So moving from that completely independence, I can't deal with you. I actually went to a place of, we couldn't sleep in the same space because I couldn't sleep. I was so anxious. So there was a complete dissociation in the home itself before we could come back to a place of healthy interdependence. And that's meant for me, one of the things Bram did for me was he gave me permission to say what I needed to say, how I needed to say it for as long as I needed to say it. And that gave me back my voice. And it gave me back my voice to say, no, I'm not happy with this. Actually, this is hurting me. And that was a huge way in terms of boundaries. I mean, boundaries are not boundaries unless we can actually put them in place, unless we can state them, you know. So that for me was so big in terms of just being able to put my boundaries in place. Not like victimizing him or like trying to get back at him, but actually recognizing I'm not feeling great. And I think that's what it's about. I'm not comfortable with this. Yes. Okay, this is what we're going to do. It's not about, okay, you've angered me, so now I'm going to be vindictive towards you, you know.
Not a consequence, it's a protection for you.
And that's a big thing that our women have had to wrestle with. The difference between actually am I putting this in place as a consequence, as being vindictive, or am I putting this in place because actually I'm not doing well in this situation and I'm needing to put some boundaries in place just to protect me in a very toxic situation.
Exactly.
So yeah, and it's such an important distinction, Kerry, and it sounds so easy to say it theoretically, but living it is not always easy. And it takes a journey of actually coming to that point of being able to do it in a healthy way, putting those boundaries in place in a healthy way that's healthy for me, that's healthy for our relationship, that keeps us as an adult to adult in that adult to adult relationship. Yeah.
And, you know, it's exhausting. It's not something that you can put in place and then that's that. It's something you've got to put in place and keep a firm line on, because when we put it in place and then relax and then, you know, going up and down, it's not exactly enforcing that protection either, which is, you know, so I think sometimes we may get tired and, I just don't have the energy to enforce that boundary today, you know. I don't know if there's anything that you found while you've journeyed with Bram's addiction and with your recovery as well as his. What has helped you possibly when there's been times when you've maybe felt the energy lessening to enforce a boundary? Has there been any sort of tactic or tool that's maybe helped you in that kind of a time?
I think, Kerry, I haven't made a big issue of it. So I haven't made like, well, I've got to keep to my boundaries.
Okay.
I've tried to always stay true to my heart. Because if the boundaries about me feeling safe, then I need to look at my heart. Sure. So if I'm feeling, that for me was a big thing, learning to feel safe again. Actually, when you do this, I'm not feeling safe. And just, so for me, it was more about being true to my heart, learning to be true to my heart. If my heart's feeling unsettled, if my heart's feeling safe, I need to express it. Is there a solution? Rather than holding onto a boundary and like sticking with it, like hectically. It was more about actually, for me, about being true to my heart. It was sexually, whether it was what I was speaking, whether it was where we were going, whether it was what we were watching, whatever it was about being true to my heart, because that's what I'd neglected for so many years. And sidelined it because we're focusing on his thing and his stuff. So, yeah.
I think that's what a lot of supporters and loved ones will go through as well. We sideline ourselves in favor of wanting to be with the person's journey of addiction and trying to help them. And so we almost put ourselves on a back foot, as opposed to actually saying, hang on, I'm just as important in this scenario as a supporter and a loved one as you are with your addiction.
Yeah, no, 100%. I remember some of the first groups I was in and being able to say, listen, I'm really so angry with him. And I wasn't judged. And it wasn't like, well, you need to sort yourself out. It was, well, that's understandable. Yeah. I mean, what he's doing is not right, you know, or you know, working in those lines, but not actually shutting me down and suppressing what I was feeling, but actually let's look at it, you know, and that is so important.
So is that maybe what you would say is why it's so important for those who are in addiction to heal from it? Because it's not only for themselves, but for their loved ones and their supporters as well.
Yeah, so research has shown that when both the husband and the wife are involved in their individual recoveries, individual recovery journeys, the chance of success or recovery success, especially for the husband and for the marriage, is so much better. So for me, that's important. It was healing for me. It was just absolutely healing for me. And it's just a value that even 4 years down the line, that is very important, because I know it's also now about giving back. I mean, I was able to start that journey of giving back early on, but it just grows, you know, and the situations are hard and harder, you know. A lot of women are in hard situations, difficult situations. Yeah,
definitely. And as you're mentioning about giving back, you know, you've, besides being one of the directors of Project Exodus, you're also one of the counselors, and you've started so many of their support groups and gotten them running and things like that, you know. You and Brahm, maybe just tell us a little briefly just about how you and Brahm have used your journey then to help others, because for us with this series, we wanted to journey about the fact of we're healing ourselves. We focus on that first, but we want to then use that to help heal others as well, you know. So maybe if you can just briefly share on that as well.
So I think for me, one of the biggest ways I've been able to use that is that, so leading up to our recovery, I think if I'd heard 5 talks on the problem with pornography, that was a lot. I think 3 of them were from one church called God First Church, and they did a series, which was amazing because they were really front-footed at that time. So for me, it's been to be intentional about using every opportunity to share my story. And every time I've been able to do that, I've given someone else permission to open up about their story. And one of the stories that stands out is we did group work in one of the churches we were training, and a lady stood up and she opened up about the fact that for 35 years, the words had never crossed her mouth. They'd been in church leadership, but her husband had battled with pornography for 35 years, older. And she just literally broke down and she just wept. And it was like just such a relief. It was so cathartic to actually say, I feel safe enough to actually say this. And for me, that's huge. It's huge. Every person, every man, every woman that's able to open up about their struggles. And so when we tell our stories, we give permission to other people to tell their stories.
Exactly.
And for me, it's wanting to normalize conversations around this. If we're saying 67% of the church are battling with pornography or watching it on a regular basis, how much are we talking about it in church? And that is the thing Josh McDowell says, that's crippling the church. It's robbing the church of her authority. So actually, if that's the thing that is being used to rob us of our authority, then actually let's actually make headway here. Let's normalize conversations, not normalize pornography, but normalize conversations around pornography, normalize recovery from it. Because we know the numbers are far bigger than what we're seeing. And more churches and more leaders are starting to speak out about it, which is really exciting.
It's very exciting. It's definitely very needed as well. And before we wrap up, and I have one more thing to ask you, I just wanted to say, you know, for those who maybe are watching and are realizing that they have a loved one in addiction, or they know someone who does, or you're a supporter or a loved one yourself, and you are looking for support, you're looking for recovery, whatever it may be, how are they able to get in touch? I know you've got various support groups around. We've got at our Grace, Cornubia and Riverside campuses as well. But if someone's wanting to find out more information about support groups and about addiction recovery for themselves and loved ones, what is the best way for them to get in touch with Project Exodus?
Beautiful, Kerry. The easiest way is to go online, www.projectexodus.net. That net is very important. There is one, I think, org. Just as well, ours is not org. But .net, and our details are on that website. Groups are advertised there, and details on the website.
That's wonderful, because it's not just in Durban, KZN. You guys are around the country.
No, we've got in Ireland. We're talking with someone from New Zealand next week. So we're growing internationally as well. We've had a lot of interest. So it's just, landing the training and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to know from you, just in wrapping up, is any takeaway thoughts that you have for our listeners and our watchers and our viewers. If there's any takeaway thoughts for those in addiction, and then for those who are maybe a supporter or a loved one of someone in addiction.
Thanks, Kerry. I think for me, the takeaway would be, please get the help. It's so easy to sit and let shame cripple us. But all that shame does is it empowers addiction, because that secrecy, the secrecy empowers the sin, if we want to call it sin, or addiction, if we want to call it addiction. But the biggest way to break shame is to actually open up in a safe space about it. So I really want to encourage you. It can seem very daunting to open up in a group of people about battling with a pornography addiction. But they've shown that it's honestly the best way to break shame, if it is a group that is a safe space and is positive and resolution orientated, and obviously has got expertise, a level of expertise as well. So please don't sit carrying weights that you don't need to carry. God has called us to run and to drop those weights, let those weights, cast our burdens on him, run the race with perseverance. And we cannot do that if we're carrying weight that he did not intend us to carry. So please, I think my encouragement would be, don't let this sit on you. Find the help you need, reach out for the help you need. We've got a business line. Grace Counseling is phenomenal in what they're doing as well. A lot of their counselors have trained through us as well in terms of addiction. So there is so much help available, but don't do it on your own. We are an army. And the enemy is after us, and he'll be after the one by the one by the one. But actually, when we're standing together, we are so much stronger. When we are on our own and isolated, we do not have the strength that we need from an army. So that would be my encouragement.
That's awesome. A very practical encouragement, and I really hope that people take that into their hearts and into their minds. Take it away with them. Think about it. Whether it's this week, next month, whenever it is, it's never too late. Literally never too late. Someone, you're saying that 35 years, that one lady, so it's never too late to reach out for help. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today, Kerry. It's been so awesome to have you with us. You are someone who is full of passion, and it's because of your journey as well, and you wanting to see people journeying towards addiction recovery and supporters recovery as well. So it's been great to have a chat with you. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everyone taking the time to listen today as well. And I really hope that you can share this with your loved ones and your world in order to reach those who need to hear this message and those who need to make this next step towards journeying towards healing and wholeness for themselves as well. So thank you so much, Kerry. And we will hopefully see you around soon.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Kerry.
Awesome. Cheers, everybody.
Bye. Bye.